Hello, this is Lorian Donovan. I am one of the players for Huntswoman and the Fool. Unfortunately, due to some technical difficulties trying to figure out how to start streaming on Twitch, like streaming the campaign on Twitch, unfortunately, we kind of lost all of Session 2. So, we do not have that available to listen to or watch or anything like that, which is my bad. However, immediately after the session ended and I figured this out, I wrote out a in-depth recap of what happened in session 2 so that anybody who is interested in listening to this series, I guess, they'll still know what's going on. So, I will read it out here. So, I guess this is just kind of like a little narration of what actually happened in session 2. Alright. Let's do it. Alright. The session starts with Sylvester and Helia investigating what happened to Hank. They chat for a while. Helia shows up her abilities with magic, usually done through playing cards. They bond over their love of cards for a little bit. She states that she practiced a lot to get good at this type of magic and shows Sylvester a strange contraption called a Terracapture, which is essentially a 3D camera. She asks Sylvester to take pictures of the crime scene while she questions the now revived Hank. Sylvester agrees. In Sylvester's investigation, he finds out several things. The blood on the ground is hand-shaped, but only big enough to have come from Hank himself. Hank has no blood on his hands, however. This is strange. The murder must have happened as the sun set, or when the sun went down, as some would say. He finds several papers shoved in a man-made hole in a wall nearby. These papers' information are as follows. There was a letter of a wife dated 2 weeks ago. The sum of money was 3,000 gold. It seemed to be directed toward his wife, which was named Deborah Yoltis. It was an angry but attempted reservation letter, and it was very hard to read. Second is a payment, a piece of paper describing a deed to a building. This is dated 1 week ago. It is titled, the building that it was titled for is General Repairs and Constructions, and the sum of money for this building, it was 300 gold. And then the third piece of paper was a threatening letter from the wife to Hank, dated 3 days ago, essentially saying that in 1 day, Hank must return the money to his wife or get paid in blood, essentially. She also talked about how Hank has been falling into a lot of pious bullshit. So, that's something. After finding these, Sylvester shares this information with Helia, who didn't have much luck with questioning Hank. She thanks Sylvie for his help and states that she has a bounty to get to. Sylvester says he's looking for a bounty as well. They head to the well, and Sylvester jumps in. After he jumps in, another strange dream sequence occurs. Sylvester lands in the water that is red with blood and finds himself in a river. He sees the dead bodies of his friends and Keelan kneeling by the river and weeping. He tries to escape the river, but he feels himself sinking. Under the water, he is grabbed by multiple skeletal hands. Skeletal hands that seem to belong to a skeleton version of Zune. They drop something small in his hands. Sylvester shouts, "Don't touch me," before returning to the present day. Sylvester recovers, looking at his hands and noticing that the object Zune had given him was a locket. He doesn't open it up, opting to shove it in his pocket to try to avoid thinking about it. Helia walks over to him, after having a discussion about lycanthropy, and helps Sylvester up, asking if he is okay. Sylvester responds with uncertainty, to which Helia asks if he would like a distraction. She gives him a playing card that shoots out fireworks, to Sylvester's amusement. She states he can have it for a little while. He is appreciative. Sylvester decides to pick up Helia's occult bounty, which consists of visiting some witches in the Wicked Woods to figure out what's going on with the moon. He takes the bounty and chats with Helia a bit more. She reveals that bounty hunting is a hobby for her and shows Sylvie a card that turns into a bulletin board with a lot of notes and string attaching them. One of the notes says Bulletin Age 10. Another states a pattern of people having strange dreams and people's accounts of these. Tormenta is listed as an exception. When questioned, Helia states that Tormenta has strange nightmares, but they don't seem to be as severe or affect her as strongly. The details of the other accounts sound eerily similar to Sylvester's, to which he asks how to get rid of them. Helia asks if he's been experiencing them too, and he says yes. She says she doesn't know yet, but she's working on it. At that, Helia teleports her and Sylvester to the Wicked Woods. They walk through the woods, chatting more. Sylvester shows Helia his card trick and throws a card at a tree, sticking it in the wood. She is impressed and continues to talk about her own card magic. She states that it is a different kind of magic from Sylvie's. Sylvester's magic is derived from the gods, while hers is witch magic. Witch magic derives from the earth. Sylvester is confused by this, asking if they talk to dirt, to which Helia just kind of rolls with it. They continue on their way. It is then Sylvester notices the crows from before watching them. The birds suddenly speak to him, saying, "Sylvester." Sylvie looks at them oddly. "Kenku," the birds say. Sylvester says, "Yes." The birds say, "Food?" Sylvester takes out a loaf of bread and hands it out. He states that bread is his favorite. The birds fly toward him and peck at the bread before biting into Sylvester's hand very hard. He tries to shake the bird off, noticing the birds have an eye in their mouth, before Helia takes out a snub-nosed revolver and shoots the bird off. Soon, other creatures come from the wood, surrounding them. The creatures are humanoid, carrying things like books and swords, one wearing knight armor, etc. Helia turns into a were-creature, a wolf with tiger claws, and Sylvester states that he would like to leave. He attempts to cast Dimension Door, but the sentinel with the book casts Counterspell on him. Cue combat encounter. A sentinel speaks to Sylvester in Infernal, asking how his Dimension Door spell worked. Sylvie says it's a trade secret. Helia morphs into a werebear and kicks the shit out of some dudes. Sylvie eldritch blasts them and their blood spreads, turning back into the birds. Finally, the path out of the clearing is opened and they run out. Eventually, they make their way farther into the forest, and Helia bandages up Sylvester's hand. He's a bit uncomfortable with this, needing to look away. Helia then sticks a pink slap wrap on his hand, which is a band-aid. Helia then begins knocking on trees and sticking cards into the wood, inspired by Sylvester's trick he showed her earlier. She states that she's looking to meet with a witch she's very close with. Sylvester joins in on the tree knocking for fun before knocking on a tree with a moon on it. It opens up into a door, and Lady Babiosa, Granny, answers. She welcomes them in. Turns out, she and Helia are pretty close friends. The house is very welcoming and warm, with a crystal ball playing a Cheeseheads game on it. She states that her 4 children are sleeping, and one of them is Citrus. Sylvie states that he knows Citrus through babysitting. He sits on the couch, and Granny offers candy to him. He takes it. It is then that Citrus leaves his bedroom and notices Sylvester. Sylvester greets him and waves at him with the hand with the friendship bracelet on it. Citrus asks where he got the bracelet from, to which Sylvia states that a good friend gave it to him. Citrus asks what it's made out of. Sylvia responds, rabbit hair. Citrus then asks himself if he can make it. He says he's going to make some for his siblings. He runs back into his bedroom, and Sylvester watches, a twinge of sadness creeping up on him. Sylvester then falls into another strange dream, where he is reminded of the cornfield and leaving the party behind. He blinks and sees the gardener in front of him, in her house, for a split second. He then returns to the present. Granny questions him, revealing that she knows that Sylvester is not from this world because his magic feels different. She also reveals that she knew the whole time he tried to play off babysitting for Citrus, and then decides to explain further what is actually happening. Granny explains that the moon is caused by Mua, as Osmek has mentioned before. She said that she might be able to find a way to get rid of it with witch magic, but it would be pretty difficult. She says in order to find a way to tap into it, she needs to figure out what caused the reaction in the first place. She needs an object that represents time. This could be a picture of a memory, or a clock, or something like that. Sylvester asks Osmek if he could have one of his many drawings Sylvester has drawn of him over the years, and Osmek gives him his favorite one. Sylvester says that he will redraw it to be even better, and gives it to Granny to throw in the cauldron. She does, and a fog mirror appears. And thus, this clusterfuck of a scene happens. Sylvester is then asked out of character to choose a party member he would like to contact. Sylvester chooses Cloud Spots, and the mirror shows a far more stoic Cloud with scars patrolling the outside of her village. Granny states that this is a scrying spell, and what they are saying is where these people are in the present world. It is then that Granny sees the broken vessel of Mua in the ball. She is surprised, stating that this was what might have caused the moon. Sylvester is distracted by the images in the fog. however. It shifts to Keelan, which is simply a gravestone with blue gold flowers. It states he had died at the age of 25 protecting his village of Old Ramington. Granny sees this and asks if he was a friend of Sylvester's. He responds with, "It's a bit complicated, but yes, he was." Granny questions him about this, to which Sylvester responds, "He had a good heart, I think." Granny says, "You think?" Sylvie says, "Yes, he did." The fog then shifts to Zune, who is working in a blacksmith shop happily and giving weapons to a Crocodian. Sylvester says he's happy for him, but seems very distant at this point. Granny asks if he is okay, to which Sylvester mentions that he wonders if he could become friends with them again in this timeline. Granny mentions that they could be very different from who they were before, to which Sylvester states that he hopes he can. It is then that the fog shifts to Sahento, who has grown a beard and is dressed in rags. He is curled up in a fetal position in the snow in front of a grave that has 2 stars carved on it, red and green stars. Sylvester is startled by this, asking Osmek if he sees it. Osmek's voice is fearful, mentioning that if he is dead in this universe, what would have happened to this universe's Sylvester? The thought of this causes Sylvester to panic, feeling upset at the thought of this even being a consideration. He tries to cover for it, stating that the other members of the Bureau had spoken with this universe's version of himself, and nothing seemed wrong. It was probably fine, right? Both Osmek and Sylvester seem very uncertain about this, and Sylvester tells Osmek that if they come across this other version of himself, to stay away from him. He doesn't want to see him. That he doesn't want to think about who a Sylvester without Osmek would be. They then talk about Sahento, to which Sylvester mentions that they should help him. Osmek says that he can't leave the coin, which worries Sylvie, until Osmek says that it's fine. He can still move inside, he just can't appear in a physical form. After having this whole conversation with Osmek, he asks Granny how to fix all this. She says that they should visit the disciples of Mua and see if they know anything. She says that she needs to make the spell, but she needs the ingredients to do so. She mentions that Sylvester will need to get these, including meeting with the Queen of Bumbleton to get royal jelly. She doesn't give it away lightly, so Sylvester will need to convince her. She is apparently a poker champion. Sylvester states that he loves poker, but he's not much for rulers. Granny says that she's tough on her children, but she's not all bad. Sylvester states that he's heard enough from Tormenta about her, and that a ruler is a ruler. The subject is changed after this. Sylvester agrees to gather the ingredients for Granny, and Granny offers to give Helia and Sylvester a ride back to Scornsfell on her broomstick. They agree and fucking fly off on a broomstick, and it was amazing. Yeah. Granny drops them off at Scornsfell and wishes them well. Helia then states that she needs to meet with their boss. Sylvester decides to come along, and Helia draws an infinity symbol on the well. It opens up a blue gold staircase, and they march inside. Helia states that the boss of the Bureau is a bit unsettling and scares people, to which Sylvester mentioned that he does too. He doesn't mind. They enter the room, and lo and fucking behold, the boss is Abith. Abith welcomes them in. He's wearing a suit, and his office is a massive library. Sylvester is delighted to see Abith, and the two have a fucking amazing exchange that I am so mad is lost forever, but they basically just start bouncing off each other about Sandwater scaring wives and other shit, while Helia just watches in bewilderment. Eventually, Helia asks for permission to do research, which Abith immediately approves, and Abith asks Sylvester if he wants to put in a bounty. Sylvester fucking puts in a bounty for somebody to bring him 4 pieces of bread, and Will lost his goddamn mind. Sylvie then puts in a bounty for one of the ingredients needed for Granny's spell, which is seawater from Seatown. Abith approves this and states that he started the Bureau after his best friend Keelan died tragically protecting the village. He made the guild in his honor and is making great efforts at learning business. He's even reading a book about it. He's still in the first chapter, though. The first chapter is over 100 pages long. Sylvester and Helia then leave and chat for a little longer. At some point, I don't exactly remember how this came up, Helia asks Sylvester if he can draw a picture of her, to which he says yes. Helia goes to her room in the guild. Sylvester decides to visit the theater before he goes to bed, and stands on the stage triumphantly. He speaks with Osmek about wanting to put on a performance, which once things start to settle down a little bit, and eventually he leaves to find his room. He finds his room and enters, noticing the room is empty aside from his little hay bed. Sylvester mentions that it's a nice room. Osmek mentions that it feels a bit empty and that maybe it would feel a little bit more homey with a desk or something in it. Sylvester says that he doesn't really see a need for one, to which Osmek responds with, "You could put all the pictures of your friends on it." Sylvester loves this idea and begins rattling off ideas on how to make the room better. He states that he's never had a room before. This is nice, and places a piece of moldy bread in the corner as his first piece of decoration. He then draws a picture of Helia to give to her in the morning like he promised. Osmek and Sylvester agree to go desk shopping in the morning, and Sylvester falls asleep. His dreams about 1,000,000 desks in his room. The after-credit scene is Helia lying awake in her own bed, holding a locket in her hand. It is a picture of her and Osmek. Dun dun dun! Alright. That is pretty much all that happened in session 2 of The Huntswoman and the Fool. Again, apologies to everyone for fucking up the recording, but hopefully this recap kind of gave a little impression of what actually happened. So, there we go.